recently I've counselled a lot of students, and a vast majority are saying that they want to go into law. But when we actually delve really deep into it, they don't want to go into law. They just want to give people an answer of what they actually want to do, because that seems to quieten down the noise around making those decisions. And they have no clue of law. They have no understanding of law. They're not sure, potentially even to the point where they probably don't want to go into law. But that seems to be the answer that everybody's happy with. So they'll keep to it. So then, of course, it opens up a new can of worms that then when they actually do come out and say what they want to do, there's concern about changing that direction. So, yeah, we have to sort of stop as parents and reflect on what our journey was like. And in every workshop that I've ever done, there's probably been, 2% of the parents that left school wanting to do something and have done it. Every single other person has had a journey like you and I, and has changed and grown and learned new things and moved in a different direction, whether it was their choice or not, but they've always, found a purpose and found something to do.
Are you feeling lost in your career, or you want to have a greater impact but you don't know where to start? Welcome to Kinda Planned, the podcast where we help you unlock the opportunities that you can't plan for. Through engaging conversations with expert guests, we help you unlock the mindsets, strategies, and tools that you need to build the career of your dreams. So subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Alex Cutterford, and let's take a moment to unlock your next opportunity. Well, welcome back to Kinda Planned. Today I am interviewing Shanna. She is a career counsellor and education consultant and founder of Bright Lane Co. So thank you so much for being on.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me.
Really excited to jump in and have a chat with you today. I really love the space that you work in supporting young people and parents through the journey of, making career decisions and navigating that crazy world of, stepping away from school and entering the world of work and, helping people make those informed decisions and things like that. So we'll deep dive into some of that as we get into the chat. But I was wondering if you would maybe just want to start by sharing a bit about your career journey and what's led you to what you're doing today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm probably the poster child for chance and happenstance and non-linear careers. I was one of those students that left school and had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do, but also partly because I was in the unfortunate position of changing schools in year 11. And so when I changed schools, the school that I went to, I couldn't do the subjects that I had been doing for the first half of the year. So I had to just get given basically what was left. Which was a very bad place to be in, because I got given things like 3-unit drama and 3-unit art. And if you know me at all, I'm the least creative person on the planet. So it was a really stressful sort of, 2 years for me, because I didn't know what I wanted to do and I really didn't engage. So I sort of totally disengaged from school at that particular time, and then have just fallen into things and that chance and happenstance as it's come along. So I basically left school and went to TAFE and did hospitality, went into commercial cookery and started to be an apprentice chef. And then restaurants closed down at that particular time. So then I went into business administration, worked in finance, worked as a PA, buying and selling shares, then went into accountancy. And I sort of, after being in offices for a few years, I got a little bit bored because I was really interested in sport and things like that. Went into learn to swim coordinator, managing leisure centres, then became a trainer. So I worked alongside, I had all my off swim qualifications, Royal Life qualifications. So I was training in personal training at the time. So I worked, local government and in fitness for about 15 years, then went back into sort of retail hospitality, went back off to uni and decided, okay, what do I want to do now? So I went and did a Bachelor of Arts just because I enjoyed it. And that was what I really wanted to do, and work out how people tick and, history and English. Everyone was always like, what are you going to do with that? And honestly, that's been probably one of the best things I've ever done. When completed that, did a lot of study tours along the way. Overseas, and then went into a Masters of Secondary Education because that was available and that's what I was offered. And I was like, yep, cool, let's do that. And then got offered a spot in a graduate certificate, careers and transition. So went into that. I also manage my husband's building sort of business because, he's a tradie and isn't au fait with, computer systems and things like that. So I sort of do all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I've gone back to my accountancy roots and sorted him out. And then been in the careers and transition space working alongside putting all of those things together for the last probably 10 years.
Wow. Okay.
So very varied.
I'll definitely need to be going back to the transcript of this episode to list out all of that. So, to someone listening to that sounds really that could potentially sound really disjointed. Though for you, have you started to see over time how all of those different things fed into one another and complemented one another?
Absolutely. I think that's the whole thing. I mean, it is really a space where I've been able to recognize all of those links and put them all together. And I think that was one of the reasons why the career and transition pathways was offered to me first. And it was basically because of my background and because I had such a wide, varied sort of space. They were like, you would be great in this, spot. We've got a vacancy. Can you help us out? And so it was really interesting to see it both from an industry perspective and from an education perspective and a parent perspective. I mean, my eldest is 25, so I've got three kids at the moment, all left school now. And it's actually been really good to put all of that together. So my love of, travel and English and history and, careers and pathways and just all of the opportunities out there, it's been really good. And that's sort of why I say the Bachelor of Arts was one of those things that really led me into this sort of space, because it's been so important to, develop and understand, empathy and intercultural understanding and sociology and the way people tick and the way the world works. And having that background has been, really interesting to be able to put everything together. And I found that I've used every single one of those skills in every job that I've had. We talk about transferable skills all the time, and that's sort of like an old fashioned term, but you do notice, I use customer service and I use communication skills and I use that understanding of how people tick to actually link everything together, which has been really interesting to see those links.
I was interviewing someone yesterday who works in SEO but had done a Bachelor of Arts, and she was like, there's hope out there for you guys that have done your Bachelors of Arts, and maybe some people then struggle to at times know how to best apply that. But when you look at it more broadly, it can apply to everything, can anything really.
Especially in the changing nature of the world at the moment. Like, there's all this talk about AI, which is coming up on, social media everywhere, and in education, certainly. It's a huge focus. But if we don't understand, cultural understanding and empathy and sociology and how people tick and what it means to be human, then we don't cope in regions of change, especially in technological change, and we can't critically analyze things, or, so it is, super important.
Yeah. So I'm thinking back to Shanna. She's in year 11. She's just had to change schools and things. What a challenge. It's interesting. And seeing how it's affected, so much of those couple of years. But then how much do you put it down to the career that you've gone on to have and the experience that you had towards the end of school there? Do you think that would have likely happened anyway? Or do you think if you had more clear decisions around what you're doing and for reasons as to what you wanted to go into, that you might have, how different do you think it would have looked?
Yeah. That's a really good question. I I do think that it would have been quite similar. I'm sort of known for the person who never says no to anything. If there's something going on, I'm there. I'm like, yeah, how can we make it happen? So I've always sort of been that doer, and a lifelong learner. I've always been interested. I'll do Duolingo, things on the weekend for fun, just because I want to learn something new. So I've always sort of had that ability and always been very, probably ADHD as far as wanting to always be doing something. So sort of fitness and sport and just being on the go was always me. Um, I think back in the early 90s when I did graduate from school, the career advisor sort of idea at that stage was, I remember my one and only interaction with a career advisor, literally knocking on the door. He opened the door, gave me a UAC guide, closed the door, and that was it. That was the only interaction that I had. between that, growing up in a regional area, so like at one stage I did want to be in the tourism industry and wanted to be, managing hotels and a flight attendant and all of those sort of things. But it was pretty much impossible down the south coast of New South Wales with zero transports. You know, like there was nothing that you had that could point you in that direction. You literally had to move interstate for anything like that. So I think, yeah, the whole chance and happenstance definitely has played a part, that opportunities come up because you put yourself in those positions to be, given those opportunities, and always following my interests of what I wanted to do next. So it's not what I want to do forever, it's what I want to do next. And that's been really important. So I think definitely my background has shaped. So coming back to your question, that experience has shaped what has, come out of my career. I think if anything, if I was in a city or something with more opportunity, it definitely probably would have looked a lot different. But in saying that, it would have always involved lots of travel, lots of just doing new things, lots of lifelong learning, just lots of, like, I literally started half marathon running a couple of years ago just because I was looking for something to do. So I've always been that type, but I think the biggest difference was being in a regional area that, there was not a lot of opportunity. So I had to make my own.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a common story that I hear from people coming from regional areas. It highlights for me a few things. Obviously, you're a good poster child for this podcast, Kind of Planned. It's all about creating the opportunities you can't plan for. But then just the element of young people not needing to have too much pressure on themselves. Like, it's okay. Like, if you get great career advice and you get to make great career selections and all these things, that's really great. And obviously we do want to empower young people to have the right information that they need to make decisions when they're at a point of making decisions. But also just reminding them that regardless of what you do choose and what you do know, it's not the end of the world if you start something, you work out you don't like it. You're going to learn as you go along the way if you embrace certain mindsets and characteristics and those human components that we need just to help us manage our life, our emotional intelligence. These sorts of things are so much more important to just keep developing over time than having the exact right thing laid out and plan in place, when we're in school. Like, I was a cabinet maker. If I was working for myself, I was probably going to need my wife to help me with the books as well.
I think most tradies do. I don't want to put that out there, but I know a lot of wives that do all the bookwork at night time.
Yeah, I reckon that's. I wonder how much that'll start to shift. But when the worst was my boss, who I worked with as a carpenter for a long time. He was still paying me with checks, upwards of less than not many years ago. There weren't too many checks going around. It was actually his daughter that got him onto Facebook and sort of digitized him a bit. But he was a Blaney boy though, so he was from Bush. He was.
Yeah, I had the same experience.
Yeah.
I had one of my accounting roles, actually. So when I was bookkeeping, and one of our accountants, a senior accountant, wouldn't use the computers when they came in. So we were, I hate to say it, I was actually in the office when we got our first computers and things like that. And they told us that, jobs were going to go because there was computers now and we wouldn't be needed. It actually just changed our job, and that's what we're going through now. But he was an old fashioned guy, and he used to use a big ledger, and he did not want to change. And he used to write every single entry by hand, and then give it to everybody else to type up for him, because he was not having a bar of computers at all.
Actually, my wife works as a legal assistant, and she's worked in law firms where she's had to write up all the handwritten notes from lawyers and stuff, and trying to interpret their terrible writing. And so adaptability, clearly, a highly necessary skill for managing your career.
Absolutely.
But I really want to dive into the conversation around parents, and so obviously, you're doing a lot of work in schools, supporting young people, supporting teachers. Then you also run workshops for parents. And over the years, I've as I've worked with young people in the sort of transition space from leaving school, going into employment, often the parents are feeling really lost about this whole thing because everything's changed from when they last had to think about it. And so really keen to deep dive into that around how can parents be supported and what are the ways parents can support young people in making career
Yeah.
decisions.
I actually really feel for parents at the moment. They're getting so much information from such a variety of different sources. And I mean, which has always been the case, but it's getting even more broad at the moment, especially with this technological revolution. And like, I just open up my feeds and everything's filled with AI. So I don't doubt that they're probably super overwhelmed. And they are. They sort of are very worried about what the future holds. They're, as I said, being given lots of information. And as parents, we tend to catastrophize things and sort of think if our young person does not have, a goal, an actual plan, then all hell's going to break loose, and it's the end of the world. And in some ways, education, industry, like the world, can perpetuate those sort of myths that that's going to happen. But yeah, we have to take a step back. And I think my first question that I ask in workshops is, to parents, well, I get them to reflect and say, well, what did you want to be when you were, 15, 16? So when you were in year 10 or 11, what was your goal? So they sort of do a bit of a workshop about this, and it's amazing to see their results, because often as parents, we also don't stop to reflect on what our journey was like. We forget. And sometimes we expect our young people to be in the space that we are right now. So, we expect them to know what they want to do and have it planned and understand how it all works. And we forget what it was like, and that we did not have that linear pathway, and that that's not the way the world works. So I think in some aspects, the pressure on some students in some sort of areas, especially to make a decision. Interestingly, recently I've counselled a lot of students, and a vast majority are saying that they want to go into law. But when we actually delve really deep into it, they don't want to go into law. They just want to give people an answer of what they actually want to do, because that seems to quieten down the noise around making those decisions. And they have no clue of law. They have no understanding of law. They're not sure. And potentially even to the point where they probably don't want to go into law, but that seems to be the answer that everybody's happy with. So they'll keep to it. So then, of course, it opens up a new can of worms that then when they actually do come out and say what they want to do, there's concern about changing that direction. So, yeah, we have to sort of stop as parents and reflect on what our journey was like. And in every workshop that I've ever done, there's probably been, 2% of the parents that left school wanting to do something and have done it. Every single other person has had a journey like you and I, and has changed and grown and learned new things and moved in a different direction, whether it was their choice or not, but they've always, found a purpose and found something to do. And interestingly, a lot of the time of those people that did choose what they wanted to do and stay in it, they're not very happy right now. A lot of them are like, oh yeah, I've been doing this for, 30, 40 years and I really don't like it. So it is really interesting to get parents to reflect, and that's when they start to actually realize that we don't need to catastrophize, that that's where our students are right now, and they will actually be fine. As long as we've got the support and they've got the information, they will actually be fine.
Yeah. So the kids have worked out, don't tell everyone I want to be the influencer, because I know everyone freaks out about that one. But tell them you're a lawyer, and then everyone will think, oh, wow, my kid's going to be a lawyer. Like, it's got that prestigious element where they're at ease with that. They're like, oh,
they're at ease.
That'll be socially acceptable and respectable. And that would be, if my kid did that, I would look like a success, is possibly something that would go through a parent's mind.
Yeah, there's that, and there's, as you said, that ease. They sort of go, okay, I'm comfortable with that. I understand what that role is, and they're not comfortable with roles that they don't understand, like the influencer sort of social space, or, there's a lot of budding professional sports people out there that, it's coaching them to understand the breadth of how the world works. But your things like your medicine and your law and your pilot, or your teacher or your nurse, all those sort of things, your engineer, lots of budding engineers. that is safe. So that's sort of where students automatically get drawn to, because they feel that that is acceptable.
Mm. And you started to touch on something there that was saying to me and it was something that I'd been thinking about in this space of probably the best starting point for a parent when working with or supporting their young person is, have they actually and are they taking ownership of their own career? And are they consciously thinking about the decisions that they're making? Because that's the sort of part where, and then that sort of feeds into the element of the best thing you could do for a young person is just let them see you in your career, the way you make decisions. Like maybe it's maybe you make that decision around the dinner table with the family as to why you're going to do something or things. Like, how important do you think that bit is in all of this?
Well, interesting you say that, because after we do the reflection, we talk about communication and the parents as the influencer. And current data shows that 75% of students will automatically go to parents first, whether they have knowledge on the area, whether they even whether they feel like their decision will be supported or not. 75% of students will go to their parents above anybody else. So those conversations are actually really important. Whether we realize how important they are, and those little comments around the dinner table or things like that, whether it's positive towards one particular pathway or not positive towards another. Even the way we communicate, whether we are looking at whether we understand our role as an influencer and supporter, or whether we're, looking at giving direction, or being a parent that just allows, you do whatever you want, or really focuses and is more of that serious nature. No, you won't be doing that, you'll be doing this, that sort of stuff. I think reflecting on how we communicate and the impact that has, because let's face it, we all know students will come to you at the most inopportune times to have conversations. You might be sitting with them in a car for 3 or 4 hours going to a soccer event, and they won't say a word to you. And then as soon as you get home and start cooking the dinner or go in the shower, that's when they'll be like, hey, I need something I need to talk to you about something. And so it's those always happen. So it's jumping on those when they happen, but also creating a space where your young person feels really comfortable to actually have those chats. And it's okay to not have the answers, because parents usually won't have the answers on what that looks like, especially not answers like that are current in the rapidly changing climate that we've got in education and industry. They won't be current on how things work. So that's okay, but it's learning where the resources are to actually go and investigate it together and support your young person in whatever that happens to be as their first choice, not something that they're going to do forever. It's what they're going to do first.
Yeah. So what would be your advice to a parent? Their kid asks them saying that they're like, I only half understand what they're even asking me about here. What's that best first response? What's the first thing that should maybe come out of their mouth outside of maybe this like sitting and giving some space and not rushing yourself too much?
Yeah, I think, look, if it's definitely something new that sort of, takes you a moment to process, I think it's just going, hey, that sounds awesome. Let's chat about it. Like, okay, let me think about it. What do you want to do? Let's actually set aside some time and chat. Like, tell me more about it. I think just having that really relaxed sort of demeanor when you're actually talking, because things can be confronting. They might go all of a sudden, they're going off to work in a foreign country that you've never heard of and doing something that you've never heard of, and all of a sudden it can be really stressful. So I guess just taking a moment to relax, gather your thoughts, and then going, yeah, cool, all right, what does that look like, and letting them sort of lead the way. A lot of the time with young people, it's giving them the tools and literally letting them lead, not necessarily doing things for them, because we want to create independent learners. We want to create, active community members who are able to actually drive their own life. So in the future, when those things do change, they can, change with that and not feel like they need you to hold their hand at every step of the way, or somebody to actually do things for them, that they need to be independent to be able to make decisions. Because often making a decision is the most important thing. Not making a decision and just letting life happen sometimes is not the best thing. You need to just choose, and you need to decide what that next step is going to be.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic advice. It takes the pressure off everyone, and the young person just remembers that that was a safe conversation to have. They will work it out on their own whether they want to keep pursuing something or not. And all as actual hard barriers start to present themselves, and you can work through when it's there. But it's like, you don't shut down the conversation when it's just that first moment of exploration. Maybe it's the first time they've asked you about a career option, and they're just asking because they just heard something or they saw something and they thought, oh, I could do that. Like, they're not saying, I want to move to Tokyo tomorrow for this job.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're not
Just let
telling you
them
that they're
explore.
going to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they're not telling you that they're going to do it. They're literally just putting it out in the world. They're putting out the feeler and launching it into the world to see what the reaction will be a lot of the time. And yeah, it's really important not to catastrophize. Like we said before, some things can be, wow, that's something different. I didn't expect that. But you go, okay, all right, now might not be a good time to chat about it. So let's chat about it later. But that sounds cool. All right, give me the information and get them to start researching, because a lot of the time they may be throwing things out there, but they haven't actually researched anything. So research is key, from year 7, immersing in as many different opportunities as you can, putting yourself out there to experience new opportunities and actually see what things are like. So it's just, it's starting that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things in my experience of working with young people, and particularly ones looking to get into employment, far and above the most in terms of who actually were able to find and secure work, it came through some sort of family connection or a network of their parents or carers. How important is it for parents to sort of be, I guess, building a network of people that they can draw into and from to support the young person to make a connection to an industry or an opportunity?
Look, networking is absolutely brilliant. And yeah, you're right. A lot of roles will come from people that you know. So it's not what you know, a lot of the time it is who you know. And unfortunately, that is the case. And that's always been the old adage that still suffices today. That's not to say that that industry is the correct one for that particular student. So my advice is always develop your networks and have students and have your sort of family space, be as active in your local area, in industry, in volunteering, all of that sort of thing as you possibly can to create those opportunities, and hopefully that development of sense of self along the way will help your student actually decide what they want to do and how they want to do that. But that actually comes from self-development. So networks are amazing because it will open the door to having that conversation. And you always want the person, especially when you're just looking for your first career, especially if you've just left uni or something like that, a network is super important because you want that person who's going to say your name in a room that actually opens up doors, that is going to promote your sort of abilities or things like that. But from a younger area, it can really help with students to have access to things that they may not have, before. But it's also really important for the parents to step back and let the student actually drive that. So things like, if we think about things like work experience or, other opportunities, you always want the student to actually find and be able to utilize that network that they've got, but actually have the conversation with the employer and act like the employee, and not rely on parents to actually develop those links for them. So they can point them in the right direction and say, hey, yeah, ring Brad next door about that particular work experience and see if he can put you on, but don't actually do it for them. So I think getting your kids involved in as many things as you can, right from kindy, but sport, extracurricular activities, being active members of the community, volunteering, things like that are super important and can open up those networks for later in life. But you definitely want those people that are your advocates, that can say your name in a room full of important people to actually get you roles, but you actually as a student want to do that work yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was kind
Mm,
of my next thought around it was there's the element of having the connections, and then it's just working out the balance of how much you do and how much you hand over to them. And maybe that's a staged thing depending on where that each individual is at. Maybe if they're, extremely, socially anxious, maybe it's like the first time I'll make the phone call with you or something, and then the next time it's going to be up to you to do it or something. But yeah, definitely
yeah,
making sure you're not dominating the process and removing the opportunities for them to learn the skills that are the actual important thing. It's like the connection is important. The skills to be able to build your own connections and leverage those is the
yeah,
real powerful part.
absolutely. Having ownership over that. I think when we organize things on behalf of students, or our young people, because they don't have that ownership, there's less sort of care that goes into that, because they haven't actually put themselves on the line there. So definitely, you could definitely as a parent broach that with one of your networks and go, hey, work experience is coming up, so and so is really interested in doing that, with you. Would you consider it? But I'm not going to organize it. I'm going to let him call you. And if he calls you and has that conversation and asks, absolutely, I just wanted to know if he could call you, and maybe just broaching that, because employers also may not have thought about, different work experience opportunities. They may not know how work experience works, or may not be comfortable taking somebody that they don't know if they're not sure that person's interested. So you can definitely smooth the waters over by having those conversations, but then it comes down to the student developing those skills to have those conversations. So things like writing a script and practicing at home, and but at least if you know that the waters are smoothed and that they can call that particular person and they might say yes, but let them do it.
Mm, yeah. I'm just remembering back to, so I left school at 16, moved to Queanbeyan from Bathurst to do my apprenticeship. And so the reason, and it's just so funny when I look back at it now, how I got my job. The first one we saw, there was a newspaper ad in Bathurst for a cabinet making role in Queanbeyan, and that's where I was going to be moving there for AFL. So we saw that, and I'd always liked woodwork growing up and stuff. So I thought, oh yeah, I'll apply for that. So I went down for that interview. I didn't get it. I didn't have good interview skills, but they were sort of asking me, why are you really passionate about this role and stuff? And for me, I was kind of wasn't. It's like, oh, I like woodwork. I'm passionate about AFL. I'm not passionate about this. I just want to get a job. So I didn't get that job.
Yeah.
Then then I was at football training, and as I'm walking down to the oval, the club had a players manager, and I yell. His name was Chook, and I yell out to him from like 20 meters away. I'm walking down to the oval. I yell up to him up at the. He was on the balcony of the clubhouse, and I'm walking down to the oval, and I just yell out to him, "Oi, Chook, get me a job!" And he yells out, "What do you want?" And I said, "Well, I went for a cabinet making apprenticeship." He goes, "Okay." And then he calls me up like however long later the next week and goes, "I've teed you up an interview, and I'm sending someone along with you from the club." So as a former player, it was obviously one of his connections with the club and still connected with the club and stuff. So he's come. I've met him at the footy club. He's come, picked me up, and drove me to the interview. And as we're driving there, he's prepping me as we drive down. He's going, "Now, if they ask you what you're passionate about, what do you tell them?" And he goes, "Forget about footy." And I was like, "Oh, but," and he goes, "No, no, no, forget about footy. Work is your number one priority, all right?" And I'm like, okay, okay. I don't like
But that's
lying, but okay.
but what you've just explained, like perfectly, is chance and happenstance, and it's that networking. It's the chaos theory of careers. Like we said before, we're the epitome of all of those theories sort of combined. And I can pretty much go through every single role that I've had has been exactly something like that, calling out to somebody, hey, I'm looking for a job. Or hey, I've got a job. Are you interested? And that sort of network, even to the point where um, I think, and I think that's also something that has been, I've just been really lucky, like falling out of school, but then going up to TAFE because that was the only option, and going, hey, what have you got available? And they literally said hospitality. That's the only course there is. And I'm like, okay, cool, I'll do that. And developed those networks that we were talking about. And I learned so much in the customer service and the presenting yourself, and there's always going to be somebody watching what you're doing. So make sure that you're actually always, treating people with respect and all those sorts of things. That really cemented in me that I ended up winning Hospitality Student of the Year. Don't even know how, but then had walked in and used those things. So when I walked into, drop a resume off, I was like, okay, look them in the eye, shake their hand, thank them for having me there, give them my resume, and got the job straight away. And then worked there for a year. And then that boss ended up leaving the business. I got home and having been made redundant pretty much. This is the first job after about 18 months, because one day he's like, right, office is closed, I'm moving, right then and there. So I've driven home going, crap, I'm out of a job. Got home, and literally the phone rings, and it's another accountant in a different business in the same building who was like, oh, I've heard you've just, what are you doing? I've heard you've just closed down. And I was like, I'm redundant. And he goes, okay, come work for me, start tomorrow. So, went and did that, got bored with that. When I went to do my Learn to Swim, it was just because I wanted to get back into sort of fitness. So had to go and do hours at a local pool, because you have to do, 20 hours of Learn to Swim lessons. And there was a new leisure centre had opened up in the area. So literally walked in and said, hey, I've got my Learn to Swim. I need to do my hours. Can I do it here? The woman who was running the swim school said, hang on a second, went out the back, came back with the boss. So we're having a coffee and she's asking me all these questions that I didn't know I was in an interview. And I'm answering all these questions, and she's like, oh, I need a duty manager starting tomorrow, running the centre, the customer service and the front office and everything. Can you do that? And I was like, okay. So then the next day, literally started in a duty manager role in this brand new leisure centre, and did my Learn to Swim hours on the side. So all of these chance and happenstance, it's putting yourself in those positions. I've always been one to follow my interest and passion, and the networks and just going to talk to people randomly just lead you in the most obscure places. But I know it sounds altruistic, but it's always where you're meant to be. You always end up getting, if you didn't get that job, it's because you weren't meant to have that job, and there was somebody, better than you for that job, or you were meant to actually be doing something else, and something else will come up that is more suited. I always feel like if you put yourself in that space of following what you really are purposeful about and want to create meaning, then you will actually, those opportunities will come.
Yeah, absolutely. The self-understanding starts to feed into it, and because then you can better filter those opportunities, but you're also not scared to take them and stuff. The story of mine gets better in that I later found out that the guy that took me was a major developer in Canberra and was essentially my boss's to-be boss, because we did the fit outs on the big developments that he ran. So there was no way I wasn't getting that job, essentially. And so that was in reflection, I was like, yeah, that was really my first major exposure to around you.
Yes.
Just yell out at the footy club and they tee up with a major developer from Canberra to come to the interview with you.
And you've just nailed on the head that whole putting yourself in that space, but that everything is interconnected, and there's always somebody watching. I'll never forget that lesson. There is always somebody watching what you're actually doing, or that interaction. The amount of times that I've served somebody in a retail space, and then I've gotten an application for, and I've been doing the interview to hire new staff, and it's been a person who's either been a really good customer or a really bad customer, things like that, or vice versa. I've been the customer, and then all of a sudden I've turned up for an interview, and the person that has just served me has just done an interview somewhere else. It's that whole interconnectedness that I don't think you realize the power of that, or even that it exists. As a teenager, you don't realize how interconnected people are. And right now, it's not even in your own little community. It's across the world. Everybody sort of knows each other and pops up all the time. Somebody will be related to somebody else, or, have a business somewhere else. And yeah, the networking is absolutely massive. So it's learning those skills to actually create your own network.
Yeah, absolutely. Shanna, thank you so much for coming on. I feel like we could keep on chatting forever about this space, and I'm really passionate about young people being supported as they navigate this journey, whilst simultaneously having them take the pressure off to have it all figured out. So yeah, thank you so much for being on. Thanks for the work that you do. And how can people get in touch with you and follow along and work with you?
Yeah, so my website is brightlaneco, so .com.au. Just jump on there. And I'm also a professional learning coordinator for Infuse Travel. So you can find me through Infuse Travel as well.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for being on.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Kind of Plan. Subscribe and send this episode to a friend that you think needs to hear it. Or head to my website, www.kindofplan.com.au for free resources, or follow me on LinkedIn and socials so that we can keep the conversation going. Now go unlock your next opportunity.